Fate Be Changed, Chapter 12, Merida. Merida knew she must look like a fish gasping for breath the way her mouth hung open, but she could not close it. She just stood there staring at the princess. She must have heard her wrong. "Did you say you were planning your escape?" Merida asked when she was finally able to speak. Eleanor nodded excitedly. "But why?" "Why I am leaving is not important. The only thing that matters is that I leave before the Highland Games begin," Eleanor replied. "What is so undesirable about the Highland Games?" Merida asked. But then understanding dawned. Had she herself not just run away from Dunbrock during the Highland Games? She knew better than most exactly what significance the games had held to a princess of a certain age. This must have been the year in which the firstborn sons from various clans would compete for her mother's hand, with her betrothal being announced shortly after. Apparently, like Merida, Princess Eleanor did not agree with being handed out like a prize at a village fair. Merida tried to summon the modicum of sympathy for McCameron Castle's princess, but all she could feel in the moment was an overwhelming sense of resentment. How many times has she been forced to listen to her mother go on and on about the importance of marriage and how it has a sacred duty she should embrace? Yet here Princess Eleanor is, planning her big escape because she did not want to honor this archaic tradition. What about these stories of how marrying King Fergus was the best thing that had ever happened to her? To hear her parents talk about their romance, one would assume her mother had been delighted at the thought of becoming betrothed. Merida's heart skipped at the thought of suddenly occurred to her. Was this the answer to her dilemma? If her mother were to stay until the Highland Games, and her father were to enter and win her hand, Merida would not have to go through the trouble of bringing them together. Freya did not say that her parents must meet it the same way they originally had, just that they must fall in love. Her father winning the princess's hand would take care of the first part of the equation. She could only assume that love would eventually blossom between the two of them once they were together. It had happened once, hadn't it? Merida saw how her father lit up whenever her mother walked into a room, how the queen's eyes sparkled when he shared an anecdote. They were no two better suited for each other, and wouldn't an automatic betrothal help speed things up? Merida could scarcely believe it, but it seemed like tradition she had despised with all her soul would be her saving grace. Except that Eleanor was determined not to go through with a betrothal at all. "Is that what you're doing when you found me?" Merida had now asked. "Were you trying to escape?" "Shh," Eleanor said. She looked back at the door again, then answered Merida with a short nod. In a low whisper, she said, "And that is why you must help me, because I abandoned my plans in order to help you." "But—" Eleanor reached out and covered Merida's mouth with her palm. She stuck her hand in the air, listening. That was when Merida also heard it. They were shuffling on the other side of the door. Eleanor put a finger to her own lips a moment before the door to the bathing room opened and the maid Orla entered. "Princess," Orla said, "what are you doing here?" I wanted to check Merida's wound, but was afraid to do so in the bed. I did not want to dirty the linens in case her injury was bleeding." "Oh, you should leave that for the physician, Princess." Orla came further into the small room, her eyes roaming over Merida. "How is the head?" she asked. "'Tis better, I think," Merida said. "But not healed completely," Eleanor said through clenched teeth. She glanced at Merida before turning to the maid. "I fear it is too dangerous for Merida to make the journey back to her home. In fact, I am not sure she even knows where her home is. She first claimed to be of Clan Argyle, and now she's saying she's from Lithonian." Merida was shocked at how easy the lies flowed from her mother's mouth. "Do you not know your people, lass?" Orla asked. Merida looked to Eleanor, wondering why she would choose clans that were so far away, but then she remembered that the princess had said about the fragility of the peace alliance. War and strife had ruled this land prior to the treaty between the clans. It was all many of these people had ever known. Merida understood why it might be difficult to forge trust between the clans, despite the peace accord, after so many years of fighting. "I wish I could remember my people," Merida said, putting a hand to her head. "I cannot remember anything." "Oh, you poor lass," Orla said. "A head injury like hers may take days to recover from, even as much as a fortnight," Eleanor said. "I believe she shall remain in McCameron Castle until she is well." She held her hands clasped to her chest. "I, for one, would not be able to live with myself if she were to suffer an even nastier injury because we turned her loose too soon." Merida was stunned by Eleanor's performance. Her mother had nearly convinced her that she was not well enough to travel. I understand, Princess, Orla nodded. But as you know, it is up to the king and queen whether or not she is allowed to remain here. Queen Katerina is not fond of guests. No, she is not, Eleanor said. She bit her bottom lip, and Merida could practically see the wheels turning in her head. A moment later she snapped to attention, her eyes widening as she looked from Orla to Merida and back again. But what if Merida was to work here? What? Merida and Orla asked at the same time. The queen would be more inclined to have her stay if she were earning her keep, would she not? Eleanor turned to Orla. What about in the kitchens? Hilda is with child and will deliver soon. Merida can take her place until she returns. I believe Mother would not object. Don't you, Orla? Well, I don't know, Princess. We are short one girl in the kitchens. The maid looked to Merida. Can you cook? I can clean, Merida said, and chop. I chop turnips all the time. She did not, but Merida figured if Eleanor had no problem telling untruths so freely, she should be able to do so. Eleanor nodded. In this way, the physician can continue to care for her wound until all her faculties have returned. Maybe 'tis dangerous to have her in the kitchens if she does not have all her faculties about her, Orla said. Eleanor waved that off as if it were unimportant. You can instruct the staff to keep her away from the fire and the knives as long as she is safe, but deemed useful. The queen will not demand she leave. Orla looked skeptical, but after a moment she lifted her shoulders in a helpless shrug. Maybe she can work in the larder and Rona can move into Hilda's place until she has that wee babe. I'll suggest it to Duncan. He has control over the kitchens. Yes, please talk to Duncan. Let him know how important this is to the princess, Eleanor said. Sorry, lass, but Duncan will not be thinking of you when he makes his decision. He will be thinking about what Queen Katerina will say. Merida had yet to meet the queen, but from the tone of this discussion she gathered her grandmother had run a very strict household. She did not care what she had to do to convince the queen that she could stay. Merida would scrub pots and pans in the scullery if necessary, as long as she were able to remain here until the start of the Highland Games. Ensuring that her father was the suitor who won her mother's hand in whatever challenge the princess chose for the competition was another matter, but Merida would figure out how to deal with that later. All that mattered at the moment was that she had a plan. The three of them filed out of the bathing room and back into the sleeping chamber. The moment Orla left the room, Eleanor turned to Merida with a gleeful smile. This will be perfect, the princess said. It will give us all the time we need for you to teach me everything you know. But how, if I'm to be hired to work, will I not have to, work? I shall talk to some of the lassies in the kitchen and let them know that you are not to be tasked too hard. Maybe we can work it out so that you must work only in the morning. And once you're done with your duties, you can head to the forest and you can train me. The resemblance to her mother was a little disconcerting. Queen Eleanor had a knack for convincing meticulous plans at a moment's notice. I'm not entirely sure this will work, Merida said. What if your mother does not allow me to stay? Eleanor chewed her bottom lip again, contemplating. Then I'll hide you, she finally said. What about the stables? You want me to sleep with the horses? It was just a suggestion, Eleanor said. She waved that off. But it will not matter, because I will talk to Duncan myself. He will convince the queen to let you work in the kitchens. She walked over to the bed and lifted a feather pillow. Now, I must warn you that the servants' quarters are not as nicely appointed as these. I have not visited them in ages, but from what I remember they are very small. You shall have a room for yourself, however, and I will sneak in better linens for you. She walked over to Merida and grabbed her hands with an earnest smile and said, I will make your stay as comfortable as possible. I promise. You are willing to do all of this just so that I can teach you to start a fire? Merida asked. She wanted to remain at McCameron Castle, needed to remain here, but still could not believe that Eleanor would go to such lengths for these lessons. Yes, Eleanor said, and to fish and hunt and do all the other things one must do to survive several days' journey in the forest. Merida stared at her for a moment before asking, Where will you go? Eleanor shook her head. I shall not say. Even to you. It is too dangerous. Once the king learns of my escape, he will send for me, and if you know where I am headed, he will do all that he can to retrieve the information from you. But what is to stop him from doing these things anyway? Won't he think I am not being truthful if I say I do not know where you have run off to? Eleanor released a deep sigh. This does not matter. When the time comes, we shall leave together, you for Dunbrock and me for my new life. We can even travel the same path until you reach your home. So your plans will take you farther than Dunbrock? Of course, Eleanor said. All I am willing to share is that I plan to go far from this kingdom and the land surrounding it. Any chieftain that owes fealty to the king is a danger to me. They will all inform the king that if I am seen on their lands. That includes Dunbrock. The princess's earnestness was troubling. It was obvious to Merida that her mother had thought this through and was determined to stick to her plan. Convincing Princess Eleanor to give Fergus of Dunbrock a chance to win her hand was going to be harder than Merida thought.